Well, for rock and roll, Jimi Hendrix burned out, okay? Bang, he was gone. Kurt Cobain, bang, gone. You look at that and you go, well, maybe it is better to just burn out than it is to fade away for rock and roll.
In 1974, Neil Young was offered the biggest record deal in rock history, millions of dollars that would have made him richer than most small countries. But Young didn't just turn it down. He declared war on the entire music industry instead. What he did next nearly destroyed his career and shocked executives worldwide. Why would a folk rock legend sacrifice fortune for artistic freedom? The answer reveals a battle between commerce and creativity that changed music forever. In this video, we'll uncover the explosive story behind the most expensive no in rock history and why Neil Young's rebellion at 79 still echoes through the industry today. Born in Toronto in 1945, Neil Percival Young would become one of the most influential musicians of his generation, but his path to stardom was anything but conventional. After moving to California in the 1960s, Young co-founded Buffalo Springfield alongside Stephen Stills, creating the foundation for what would later become his distinctive sound, a raw blend of folk, rock, and country that challenged every musical boundary. By the early 1970s, Young had established himself as both a solo artist and member of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. His 1970 album, After the Gold Rush, and 1972's Harvest had catapulted him into the upper echelons of rock stardom. The latter album, featuring the haunting ballad Heart of Gold, became his first #1 hit and proved that Young could craft commercially successful music without sacrificing his artistic vision. But success came with a price. Young found himself increasingly uncomfortable with the expectations that came with mainstream recognition. He watched his fellow musicians bent to industry pressures, crafting formulaic hits to satisfy record executives and radio programmers. The music business was becoming a machine, and Young refused to be just another cog in its operation. His relationship with Reprise Records, where he had signed in 1968, was growing increasingly strained. The label wanted more albums like Harvest, radio-friendly, commercially viable records that could guarantee massive sales. Young had different plans entirely. He was already experimenting with electronic music, noise rock, and concepts that wouldn't fully emerge in popular music for another 2 decades. The pivotal moment came in 1974 when Neil Young made a decision that would define his entire career. Reprise Records, backed by Warner Brothers, presented him with a contract renewal that industry insiders described as one of the most generous deals ever offered to a recording artist at that time. The multi-million-dollar agreement promised Young unprecedented creative control while guaranteeing massive financial rewards for the label's investment. But Young saw something sinister beneath the attractive terms. The contract included clauses that would have given the label significant input on his musical direction, marketing strategies, and even touring decisions. More importantly, there were commercial performance expectations tied to the deal, subtle but unmistakable pressure to deliver radio-friendly hits. Young's response was swift and shocking. He rejected the offer outright, telling industry executives that he refused to become what he called a commercial popster. This wasn't just about money or creative control. It was about the soul of rock and roll itself. Young believed that accepting such a deal would compromise everything he stood for as an artist. The decision sent ripples through the music industry. Record executives couldn't comprehend why an artist would walk away from guaranteed wealth and security. But Young had calculated the true cost of the deal, and it wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in artistic freedom. What happened next proved that Young's rejection wasn't just about principle, it was about preparation for artistic warfare. Instead of delivering the folk rock albums that had made him famous, Young began crafting what would become some of the most challenging and experimental music of his career. His 1975 album, Tonight's the Night, was a dark, alcohol-soaked meditation on death and loss that featured deliberately sloppy production and deeply personal lyrics about friends who had died from drug overdoses. The album was so raw and uncommercial that Reprise initially refused to release it, sitting on the recording for 2 years. Young followed this with Zuma in 1975, which featured his collaboration with the band Crazy Horse and marked a return to harder rock sounds. But it was his 1977 electronic experiment, American Stars and Bars, that truly demonstrated his commitment to artistic evolution over commercial success. The album mixed country ballads with experimental electronic tracks that sounded like nothing else in popular music. The culmination of Young's experimental period came with Rust Never Sleeps in 1979, an album that would later be recognized as prophetic of the punk and grunge movements. Young had essentially invented alternative rock a decade before it had a name, proving that his rejection of commercial pressures had freed him to become a true musical innovator. Young's experimental phase didn't go unnoticed by record executives, and their reaction was swift and brutal. Geffen Records, his new label after leaving Reprise, became increasingly frustrated with Young's refusal to deliver commercially viable material. The tension reached a breaking point in the early 1980s, when Young released a series of albums that seemed designed to challenge every expectation of what a Neil Young record should sound like. His 1982 album Trans featured heavily synthesized vocals and electronic beats that alienated longtime fans and confused critics. This was followed by Everybody's Rockin' in 1983, a rockabilly tribute album that seemed to mock the very concept of artistic consistency. Geffen Records executives were so outraged by these releases that they took the unprecedented step of suing their own artist. The lawsuit, filed in 1983, alleged that Young was deliberately delivering uncharacteristic and uncommercial material that violated his contract obligations. The albums were not characteristic of Young's previous recordings, stated the legal documents, marking one of the first times a record label had sued an artist for being too experimental. Young's response to the lawsuit was characteristically defiant. He continued releasing challenging material while fighting the legal battle, proving that his commitment to artistic freedom extended even to courtroom warfare. The lawsuit was eventually settled out of court, but it established Young as the ultimate symbol of artistic integrity in an industry increasingly driven by commercial considerations. The consequences of Young's rebellion extended far beyond his own career, fundamentally changing how the music industry viewed the relationship between artistic freedom and commercial success. His willingness to sacrifice immediate financial gain for long-term creative control inspired countless musicians to demand better terms from their labels. Young's experimental albums, initially dismissed by critics and ignored by radio, eventually gained recognition as pioneering works that predicted major musical movements. Trans is now considered an early example of the electronic music that would dominate the 1990s, while his grunge-influenced sounds directly inspired bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam. The financial impact of Young's decision also proved prescient. While he may have lost millions in immediate income by rejecting that 1970s contract, his diverse catalog and maintained creative control allowed him to profit from numerous reissues, licensing deals, and tribute projects over the decades. His refusal to be categorized or controlled made him more valuable in the long term, not less. More importantly, Young's stand became a template for artist rights movements that continue today. His example showed that commercial success and artistic integrity weren't mutually exclusive. They just required an artist brave enough to define success on their own terms. Thanks for watching. Click here to check another video and make sure to subscribe to our channel.